Greetings, comrades. From the Communist Party of Great Britain, Marxist-Leninist. We are so sorry not to be able to be with you this weekend, but we are with you, of course, always in spirit. What I'm going to deliver to you today is a shortened version of a longer paper I've written, which we will circulate to you, and I hope that you will take the time to read. Thank you. So we're here today because we share a concern about what's going on in the world, and we want to make a contribution towards solving the deep problems besetting our communities, our nations, and our planet. But where do we start? It can be very hard to tell. With so much conflicting information, how do we judge what is right and what is true? The news cycle, social media, they combine to create a huge and very effective distraction machine, one that helps prevent us from asking whose priorities we're actually responding to. Do the stories that make the headlines on mainstream media really reflect what's important in the world? Who really decides what's trending on social media? But just realizing we're being lied to and distracted is not enough. We can't make sense of surface phenomena unless we understand what's happening underneath. Marxist science is the tool we need to make sense of the world and find our perspective. Marxism reveals the underlying laws that underpin capitalist economics and the movement of history. It shows us where profits come from, how value is created, how class is developed and why they clash, what is the root cause of poverty and inequality. And further developed by Lenin, Marxist science also explains the highest and final stage of global capitalist development, imperialism. Lenin's work on imperialism showed the economic drivers of this system and also revealed the effects it has on the working class movement in its home territories and all over the world. You know, it's becoming clear to many people now that every day during which the decaying parasitic system of monopoly capitalism, imperialism, continues to exist against the will and against the interests of the vast masses of humanity, more people are dying unnecessarily. They're dying from preventable hunger, preventable disease, and preventable wars. They're suffering from preventable poverty and groaning under the burden of economic super-exploitation and authoritarian regimes. The imperialists are constantly providing fresh proofs of what they showed us in World War I, that there is no level of human sacrifice they consider too great in pursuit of their aims of total domination and maximum profit. How many Ukrainians have died because NATO was determined to smash Russia? How many Palestinians have died because the USA is determined to hang on to its colonial outpost in the Middle East? As time passes, the contradictions of capitalism get worse and worse. More wealth accumulates into bigger fortunes, and these huge fortunes are held in fewer hands. The inequalities in our society become obscener and more inescapable, and the machinery of violence and repression required to maintain this unjust order becomes more enormous and unstable. While the capitalist imperialist system remains in place, it is the workers who are expected to pay the price for the failures of capitalist economics. We pay through inflation, which is the theft of our wages and our savings. We pay through austerity, which is the theft of our social wage. We pay through the loss of our pensions, the extension of our working hours, the destruction of our infrastructure and social services. We pay through unemployment, homelessness, hunger, disease and poverty. And we pay through war. And all this suffering comes about because the huge wealth that the working people have produced is held in the hands of a tiny monopolist class that is unable to use that wealth constructively. This contradiction is built into the heart of the capitalist system of production for profit. It cannot be legislated or reformed away. It's vital that we understand that the imperialists are not all-powerful and their system is not eternal. The time in which the world's masses will inflict a decisive defeat on the forces of imperialism is approaching fast. The imperialists need to silence debate, their drive to criminalize all dissent, these come from a position of weakness, not strength. As Chairman Mao Zedong rightly said, imperialism is a paper tiger. The imperialists may be strong and powerful, but they are not nearly as strong and powerful as they want us to believe. The deepening of the global capitalist economic crisis is driving the imperialists to push down harder on the world's masses, and it is pushing them to provoke more and more war. But in the process, they are creating a rising tide of revolutionary sentiment and activity among the world's peoples. As Karl Marx long ago pointed out, what this system creates above all are its own gravediggers. The founding motivation for the formation of the World Anti-Imperialist Platform was the recognition that we need to coordinate our struggle across national borders. We also need to overcome the theoretical confusion that has destroyed the old communist movement, leaving it divided and disconnected from the masses. Despite these problems, Marxist theory and Marxist understanding remain essential to our common struggle. Without the participation and knowledge of steeled and scientifically guided socialists, our chances of liberating ourselves from imperialist exploitation are extremely low, no matter how revolutionary the sentiments of the masses become. The fundamental essence of the world war now raging in Europe and the Middle East and threatening to spread to East Asia is that it pits two great camps against one another: the decaying US-led NATO imperialist bloc on the one hand, and the rising forces of independence and anti-imperialist resistance on the other. Socialist China, anti-imperialist Russia, and the socialist DPRK form the backbone of the resistance forces, and they are joined by every country that wants to forge its own destiny free from outside interference. A crucial question we have to answer if we want to unify the forces of anti-imperialism is, what is imperialism? How do we identify our enemy? Imperialism in the modern era is not a policy of this or that powerful state. It is a global system of highly developed capitalist production in which huge monopolies have developed, concentrating the wealth and dominating the markets of the entire world. In this system, the export of capital for investment in order to reap huge super profits from cheap raw materials and labor in less developed countries has become the main activity of the countries that are home to huge stores of finance capital. That is primarily the USA, Britain, France, Germany, Japan. This stage of development brings huge contradictions. It brings blatant parasitism by the West and ruthless suppression of the super-exploited peoples in the rest of the world. Its immense inequalities and injustices are so unbearable and so unsustainable that movements for liberation and revolution have become inevitable. An important question to ask is, why have so many people in the West fallen for the idea that Russia and China are imperialist powers? Essentially, it's because our rulers, seeing how the masses developed a hatred for imperialism, have found a way to manipulate these sentiments and our ignorance of economic theory. They abuse the language of anti-imperialism and manipulate our disgust of their abuses. And they say to us, Russia and China are big, they have big militaries, they are imperialists. And they repeat this endlessly and without evidence. They are aggressive, they are imperialist. They must be decolonized. But the strong armies we see today in Russia, which actually was inherited from the Soviet Union, in China and in the DPRK, were built in response to the people's need to defend their socialist gains. They were created for defensive, not aggressive purposes. Their advanced technologies were developed through socialist planning, not through the drive to conquer territory and gain profits from super exploitation. That is why the armed forces of these countries have focused on cheap weapons that are effective in defense: supersonic missiles, drones, air defense systems. There is no justification, either economic or military, for branding Russia and China as imperialist. There's no country in the world where Russian or Chinese military forces operate aggressively without an invitation. There are no Russian or Chinese monopoly corporations taking over our lives and dictating to our governments. The Russian and Chinese economies are not living as parasites from investments they've made abroad. Their workers are not being bribed by a cut from such super profits into accepting their rulers' crimes. The reverse is true. Russia has angered the West by offering military cooperation to countries in Africa and Latin America and Asia that have requested this partnership and assistance, helping to keep imperialist domination at bay. And China has angered the West by offering infrastructure and development help, by making loans on easy terms, and by sharing technologies instead of monopolizing them. The same people who ask us to believe that the war in Ukraine is a dispute between rival imperialist powers are also pushing the myth that Hamas and Israel are as bad as each other. They want workers to believe that both sides of the war in Palestine are in some way manipulated by the imperialists for their own ends, that Hamas is not part of a legitimate national liberation resistance movement, but a pawn in some great game of inter-imperialist rivalries. The imperialists and their defenders want to stop us from understanding who is really fighting whom and why. They want to stop us working out whose side we should be on. They don't want us to understand that humanity's cause will be advanced by a victory for Russia in Ukraine. They don't want us to understand that humanity's cause will be advanced by the liberation of Palestine. They don't want us to see that in both these cases, the defeat of the fascists and their backers will be both a military and an economic blow to the imperialists, and that this is something that will strengthen the cause of the workers. That is why the platform has unequivocally taken the side of Russia and the Donbass against the Ukrainian fascists and their imperialist backers. It's why we have unhesitatingly taken the side of the Palestinian and wider Middle Eastern resistance forces against the Zionist fascists and their imperialist backers. For the same reason, we will take the side of the DPRK if war the USA has been pushing for finally breaks out on the Korean Peninsula. And we will take the side of China if the USA succeeds in its relentless provocations towards war over Taiwan. We will work tirelessly to educate the masses about the real nature of the imperialist system. And we will do everything possible to help the people to see that real peace will only come through the complete defeat of imperialism. We are committed to working actively for the defeat of all the forces of imperialism wherever they are, for the disruption and disbanding of NATO. We are committed to working actively to combine and strengthen the forces of anti-imperialism all over the world. The objective conditions are ripening fast for a new revolutionary upsurge. There is the real possibility of a wave of critical defeats for the imperialists that could shift the balance of forces decisively in favor of the working masses. The subjective force, working class organization, will be decisive in this coming period. Comrades, now is the time to study and to organize as never before. No cooperation with the imperialist war machine, defeat for imperialism's fascist proxies in Ukraine and in Israel.